Item is approved. Minutes are adopted. Item number 1, water and sewer reserve for future improvement, budget revision. Number 2, Ms. Standridge.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
Yes, this budget revision is for the $1.5 million agreement with the state for the Woolsey-Fennell Bridge replacement utility relocation that Mr. Gurney briefed you in Projects Committee. This is the fully reimbursable planning and design portion of that project. And so we will be booking both a revenue and an expense line item for them to continue with that contract.
From my learning, what's the lag time between those two typically? Is it a year, a month?
Between those two.
Our expending the funds and being reimbursed?
Oh, well, goodness. It
Is
really
it
depends
significant?
on, it depends on the agency of the state that we're dealing with. Generally we can when we file for reimbursement, it takes us maybe a couple of months to receive a payment back. Depending on the agency, it could be up to 6, 7, 8 months.
Okay, but it's neither the magnitude nor the time lag that would present a hardship on our coffers.
No, sir. No, cash flow for us is not really consideration at this level of an amount.
Carly, in that particular grant, that earmark or whatever, that grant that Senator Shelby got us, that $100 million has already been paid to the state, correct? Or is it still in the federal government?
Oh, I do not know that now. That's not under my purvieue of.
I was just thinking if they've got that $100 million, they're getting a lot of interest.
Normally, when
on our money.
we have a grant with DOT, and I would assume that the earmark is going to flow through DOT. The normal setup is that we again apply for reimbursement, and we get drawdowns from the amount that sits in U.S. Treasury. I would imagine that it's similar, but state agreements and municipal agreements could differ wildly, and I just don't know.
Also, I do want to point out that after we approve this year, it still has to go to the state for them to approve the reimbursable agreement. And once they approve the reimbursable agreement is when the account or the funding is actually set aside or earmarked for this project. So we won't start work until we have everything back from the state.
All T's are
Yes.
crossed and I's
Yes.
dotted and all that. For some reason, I may be wrong. I thought that the feds had given that money already to AlDOT as the administrator of that in that earmark. And then if whatever didn't happen, then it would have to go back to the feds. But I may be totally wrong, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure.
And generally, again, from a municipal standpoint, prepaid grant funding is very rare. I've really only seen it maybe 3 or 4 times in my entire career that I've been working with grants. Normally, the U.S. Treasury holds it because they can invest it,
Sure,
and
I
then
get
we
it.
will draw down reimbursement style.
They can spend it. So, all right, sorry. Motion.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
But was it 20 or 25 we got for the Savings Center?
$25 million from Savings Center.
We got that up front, right?
That's what the
we
state
put
though.
the state.
That's the state of Alabama gave us that.
Okay, item number 2, General Fund Reserve for Future Improvements, Budget Revision number 5, Ms. Standard.
Yes, this general fund RFFI budget revision has 2 separate parts. The first one is the $275,000 for the PAL basketball court renovations that we are proposing to come from contingency, and I do realize that there's probably some discussion to be had on that. Item number 2 within that budget revision, I'll just quickly do it, is $5,000 from contingency to go to the Cripps Mill Creek Railroad drainage. This will correspond to the item that's on number 3 on the Finance Committee agenda that Mr. Gardner will brief you on. But if you would like to go into talking about the 275, we can do that.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
let's move into that.
I emailed a PDF document to the City Council to go over the open items of funding that are available. The first one here that we have is just the general fund contingency that we set in their annual budget every year, $520,000. Then we move into the RFFI. We have a couple of projects that we could have available for closeout. The Afflink Place storm drainage is one for $29,000. Resurfacing of 6th Street and MLK 30th Avenue is $37,500. The CMP lining project that you were briefed on in Projects Committee, with that contract award, there is now $142,000 available within that CMP lining line. as Mr. Crow mentioned, I think that CMP lining could be taken as a bulk and not just individual projects. I'm sure they could do something else with that 142. But with the contract award, that is now really kind of considered available at this juncture. And then the contingency within the RFFI is the 1.2 million. That's where we would propose to pull it from within the budget revision that is being presented at Finance Committee today. Moving into Elevate. Also, that was presented at Finance Committee is the Lake Nickel bathrooms. There was a balancing change order there. With that balancing change order, there is now $86,000 left in that line item. There is the Sokol Park and Watermelon Road improvements. There's that turn lane on Watermelon Road that was done, and that is $3,500 that's left over in that. So that's really not a ton of money. The general contingency within Elevate is $1.6 million. And then into the Alabama Trust Fund, we normally get one check a year from the state of Alabama for the Alabama Trust Fund. We have not received that to date for this fiscal year. Normally, that's about $900,000. And so we can project that we'll get another $900,000. We use $500,000 of that always to pay on debt service for the 2014 bond issuance. So that leaves about $400,000 left in contingency that we can project, again, not on hand, but we can project that for fiscal 25.
And so is the trust fund money, is that pre-designated for some, pre-obligated
It's required to be spent on infrastructure.
to be spent on infrastructure?
Yes, sir.
And this would fit that?
Yes, sir. A general, public works infrastructure project, it would be eligible.
Carla, let me ask you this question. How did you arrive at that particular one to pull down?
From the general fund RFFI contingency?
Yes, ma'am.
So first of all, because it's the largest one that's really generally available as an open bucket. Number two, when we did our capital projects proposal back in April of this year, we had to add a little bit of money to the project because we knew we were kind of on the trajectory of being over, and we used the RFFI in that instance as well. And so multi-funded projects, they do propose some administrative headaches. And so if we can keep the multi-levels of that funding down, it's a little bit easier for us. And so again, since the contingency is there, we've already funded it with RFFI before now. And again, the administrative headaches of pulling from multi-funds, we propose the 1.2 million contingency to be the bucket that we pull from.
Gentlemen, any thoughts on how we could spread the love some? I understand turns the dial a little bit on administrative hassle, but
Mr. Chairman, why don't we leave the trust fund alone and maybe divide out a third of this out of the 520, clear out the AFLink, the resurfacing, and then jump to contingency for the rest of the balance. That leave the CMP lining alone, and then knock out Lake Nickel and Sokol Park, whatever. I think that won't be as much money because Carly, I used to could add pretty quick in my head, but 90,000 is 270, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're 91, 5, some not 92,000 less, right? So you're about 91,000 for each one. If you take 91,000 out of contingency out of the 520. Clear out AFLink, resurfacing, swing on the contingency, the 1.229, right? And then take out Lake Nickel and the Sokol Park is almost exactly what you need, and take the difference, right, out of contingency and leave the trust fund alone. Don't touch that 400.
Okay, so the total of, if we did project closeouts for AFLink, resurfacing, Lake Nickel bathrooms, and Sokol Park, that's 157,279.
Okay.
And so then you would want to take the remaining 125-ish from contingency within the RFFI.
Or I just said take what's left?
So if I did 275 minus these. You're looking at, you'll need 117, 720, 41.
out of GFF RFI.
You can throw as many S in there as you
But
would
then that would really kind of, the way I'm thinking, that would decrease the storm drainage resurfacing for MLK and the CMP lining, correct?
We're not gonna touch CMP lining,
No, we're not touching CMP.
but the
Storm
resurfacing,
drainage
that's
is
money, I
one.
guess, that they resurface that and there's money left over.
That's left over.
That's left over, it's already been done,
And I-
right?
Right, but let me say this, when it comes to, my district, the more I'm looking at these numbers and figures and thinking, I wanna have as much as I can for my district, as much as we can leave it in there. And I understand what you're saying about
Is
taking
this
it,
project in your district?
yes,
Okay.
and I
We're adding
understand,
another 275 to a project in your district.
correct,
though.
but I do know that we've added millions to other projects within other districts.
True.
So therefore, I want to make sure that my district is covered in a way that we can be able to use it without decreasing revenues and monies.
There's been a lot of millions in your district too,
Correct.
probably
A
a
lot
lot
more
more
than
than
I don't
some
know.
other districts, so
All
I,
right, food fights over.
but I hear you, I don't know if that, but that 37.5, I guess you could redeploy that into paving,
Right.
but we're only,
It's not a lot of paving.
no, not for that, but that's,
So what would your recommendation be, Mr. Russell?
My recommendation would have.
Wait, let me get Mr. Crows on one
Okay.
side. We got,
well, initially, we were talking about taking a third out of the general fund contingency at the top. We don't have to do that. Because when Carly added up what those were, we were only short $117,000, which you could take out of the GFR, FFI, maybe contingency.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
But if you leave,
Now that's what I was thinking.
yeah, if you leave the 37.5, then you're gonna have to take 150 out of that contingency down there. But I don't know what, all that would do is just
So, and
stays in the pot.
And the general thought is when we close out the AFLINK drainage and the resurfacing, that's just gonna get thrown into the RFFI contingency anyway.
That's right.
And so if we go ahead and pull from the contingency, we always will do review of projects and project closeouts when it comes to the capital budget proposal anyway. That's when we shake every single tree and close every single thing. And so really those two projects for closeout, it's
They're gonna end up in
They're gonna
that
end up
pocket.
in
it's a
that
right
number.
pocket, left pocket
Right.
kind of thing
Yeah, they're gonna
anyway.
end up in that number.
When do we think that'll happen?
We should have financial statements by the, end of March, and so I would think that we'd maybe have capital project proposal maybe end of April.
Okay.
Mhm.
How about we keep this simple? 87 grand out of the Lake Nickel bathrooms.
Mhm.
And that would take us down below 200 needed. And we've got, so since those three are coming into the GFR FFI in 3 months, check.
Yes, correct.
I don't mind dipping into the RFF even more. So Norma, was there something else we saw? We got 90 grand between Lake Nickel bathrooms and Sokol Park road improvements, check.
That should be, you could use that as part of it.
So that would take us down to
85.
185 out of the GFRFFI,
Mhm.
check. And which is gonna be replenished that we already know of.
Right.
29 and 87.
66.
So let me try that one more time. We're routing the Lake Nickel bathroom leftover and the Sokol Park Watermelon Road improvement leftover.
And then the rest out of
And
contingency.
the
And
rest out of GFRFFI.
we can do that.
Norman, you okay with
Yeah,
that?
that's simple.
And we'll just send that directly to council next week if that's okay.
And then those other things, they'll close out they'll go back in the.
They'll go back
later.
into RFFI contingency when we do closeouts in, March April.
That's fine. Then, Mr. Holmes, you were checking to see if any of this necessitated any pin change to the MOU amendment.
No, sir, I believe,
Sources
no,
are
sir,
not
it doesn't, I'm sorry. It's, the MOU is actually a CNS item, but none of the specific funding sources are listed in there, just the number amount, so we're.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That
Thank
is
you.
approved. So item number 3. That includes the $5,000, the standard.
I'm sorry.
Part 2 of that, the $5,000.
Yes, sir, that's
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 included
included
in our,
in what you just
in
voted
our
on.
motion.
Yes.
Mr. Busby, just so I'm clear and take the opportunity to say it, we will need to do a substitute for what was previously printed in the agenda to reflect the new sources for you tonight.
Mr. Gardner.
Good afternoon. So
Afternoon.
I may have to have Mr. Bobbitt step up here and help me, but I'm gonna try it on my own. What we're asking for, this $5,000 is the second amendment to the funding agreement that we have with the University of Alabama. It's the Cribbs Mill Creek Tributary Study. And the reason that we're asking for this additional, is we are going to seek a PROTECT grant, a federal grant under the PROTECT program, to fund around $20 million worth of drainage improvements. This study that Duncan Coker did, this would be the first 3 phases of that study. Cost estimates totaled right around $20 million. I think the total project was closer to about $50 million. But we've met with ALDOT. We have as partners with DCH and also the University of Alabama on this project. It's a benefit to all of these interested parties. The additional $5,000 is to make some updates to the study that was completed in 2022, and also for their assistance in putting together the grant application.
Their who? University? Their assistants.
Duncan Coker, I'm sorry, Duncan Coker. They'll make some modifications to the document that was prepared in 2022, and then they'll be assisting us with gray matter in the grant application and probably doing some exhibits mainly to go along with that.
Okay. Do you have any questions, comment?
That's exactly what I was saying.
Good job,
Do-
good job.
Do we need to call him up there to grill him?
Why don't we?
Anything to add, Mr. Bobbitt?
No, he did an excellent job.
Good job,
He did
Tom.
pretty good, too. I'll make a motion to
Second.
approve.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Item's
Jim.
approved. Is there any other business to be brought before finance committee? Okay, if not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
2 minutes.